Finally sit down and watch a popular movie and you're just pissed at yourself that you didn't watch it earlier. That's how I'm feeling right now with An American Werewolf in London. I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't seen it before last night, but I'm very happy last night that I sat down and decided to finally give it a watch, because I laid in bed last night for hours just thinking about this movie. That's how much of an effect it had on me. There's only certain horror movies, a handful, that have affected me this way, mainly Halloween, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Thing, to name a few. But An American Werewolf in London affected me just like those movies have. And I'm so happy I finally gave it a watch, and it's going to be a regular staple for me moving forward. What I want to do is just kind of put my initial thoughts out there on this movie. I jotted down a few notes, just a few bullet points that I want to make sure that I hit. But this is just going to kind of be my thoughts as a first-time viewer, finally, of An American Werewolf in London. Like I said, a little bit embarrassing that I haven't seen it. I mean, hell, one of the best YouTube channels around that deals mostly in horror movies is titled The Slaughtered Lamb. Shout out to Darren and Frank. So, you know, it's kind of crazy that I hadn't seen this movie. But I want to just kind of get my thoughts out there on it, and then kind of talk about a hidden meaning that I was thinking about last night that, you know, that came to me, and kind of what the metaphor is and things like that. I have basically avoided most articles on this movie, so maybe the meaning that I am going to talk about isn't very hidden. Maybe it's just common knowledge, but it's kind of my takeaway from what the movie means. First off, let's talk about the story right away. So, two guys are backpacking through Europe. David and Jack. They're backpacking through Europe. It looks like they're just outside of London, and they stop at some bar called, like I said, The Slaughtered Lamb. And it's kind of weird in this bar, right? You know, they're obviously outsiders, and there's like a pentagram on the wall. And they ask about the pentagram, and they essentially get kind of shunned and kicked out of the bar. But they're told to stick to the roads, you know, so and watch out for the full moon. So as they're walking through, and we're going to talk about the look of this scene in a second, but as they're walking through, you know, they start hearing howling in the distance, and David is attacked and killed by this werewolf. Or not David, sorry. Jack is attacked and killed by this werewolf. Sorry, like I said, just saw this movie last night. But Jack is killed, and David is attacked and injured, and he wakes up in a hospital in the city of London. And the rest of the movie is kind of dealing with the ramifications of that. He's in the hospital for what looks like probably a week after he finally wakes up after a few weeks, and he starts getting these visions, dreams, whatever you want to call them, of dead David and other things. And it's basically telling him that he is going to turn into a werewolf. Obviously, you know, he doesn't believe it. The nurse that he falls for doesn't believe it, because he kind of starts, him and this nurse develop a relationship. When he gets out of the hospital, he rooms up with this nurse, right? Man, what a life, other than his best friend getting attacked and killed in front of him. He's making out all right here. But eventually the full moon comes. He turns into a werewolf, and the ending that we all know is coming happens, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But that's kind of the quick, high-level synopsis of this movie. But I just kind of want to talk about the highlights and then get into the meaning that I was talking about. So some of the highlights of this movie, which, like I said, it's fantastic and it has really stuck with me. I finished it 12 hours ago, and it's still stuck with me. But some of the highlights of this movie. Number one, the atmosphere. Especially at the beginning when they are backpacking through the moors, just outside of London, just outside of the Slaughtered Lamb bar. The atmosphere is fucking fantastic. The cinematography is great. You know, there's fog in the background. They're backpacking. They got these backpacks. It's raining. And you can just, you know, feel the dread in the air. It's so fucking good. So good. Like right off the bat, you know, there's just an ominous feeling here. It doesn't waste any time. You know, David is killed within the first, I don't know, 15 minutes. It's crazy. And then we're kind of dealing with the ramifications from that the rest of the movie. So right off the bat, like I said, the atmosphere is great. Hospital atmosphere is good too. The London atmosphere is good too. But mostly I'm talking about the beginning of the movie. It hooked me right away. You can't talk about this movie without talking about the special effects, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I think were done by Rick Baker. John Landis directed this movie. He's directed so many famous movies, mostly comedies. But he directed Trading Places. He directed Coming to America, Animal House, things like that. But Rick Baker's special effects here are superb. The transformation scene is the best transformation scene I've ever seen of a werewolf. And this came out back in, 1981, I believe. So major props for these practical special effects throughout the movie. David, appearing in these, I don't know if they're visions or what, but David appearing as a corpse, all mangled up, and every time he appears again, he's looking a little worse is great. The aftermath of some of the kills from these werewolves are just fucking mangled and just fantastic. Bravo to Rick Baker for these special effects. Next, let's talk about the dream sequences for a second. So throughout the movie, David is having these dream sequences. Some of them are him, running through a field naked and then eating a deer. There's another dream sequence where he is like on a bed and he's got, all of a sudden, you see him and he's got this evil face. There's another sequence where his family is watching TV. They're watching the Muppets. Okay. And all of a sudden the doorbell rings, his dad answers, and it's full of what I can only gather is like demon or some type of monsters, Nazis that is killing his family. And we found out he is Jewish earlier, so there's some meaning between that too, the Holocaust and all the horrible things that happened to Jewish people 40 years before this movie came out. So there's a lot of meaning there. But all these dream sequences, are so well done and so just kind of creepy and weird that it just kind of makes you scratch your head a little bit, thinking, what is going on here? There's even a great, the classic, dream where you're dreaming and then you wake up and you're in another dream or whatever. So they get you pretty good there, which has kind of become a cliche these days. But back in 1981, I'm sure that really got a lot of people. So all the dream sequences are very well done, and they just kind of provide a little bit of like weirdness to this movie. A couple more things as far as what I think are highlights of this movie. The subway chase scene. So there is a guy gets off a subway car in London, right? A guy in a suit, and he's in the subway and he's all alone, and he hears something, and he says a very like British thing. Instead of this isn't funny, he says something very British there. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's very proper, pretty funny. So he starts walking, and then we don't see the werewolf at this time. We don't see it till the end, but he starts running through the corridors or halls or whatever, and it's just long hallways, and he's running, and like I said, we don't see the werewolf, but we know it's coming. He knows it's coming. Finally, he gets to the escalator, and he trips going up the escalator. He trips, and there's a great fucking shot where he's laying down on the escalator, and it's shot from above, from the top of the escalator, right? And you see from the top at the bottom of the screen, you see him going up on the escalator, laying down, and you see the werewolf just come into the bottom of the screen, walking towards the escalator. And we don't even see the guy get mangled. We just see his point of view of the werewolf, going up the escalator and fucking probably killing him. Just brutal. A couple more highlights, in my opinion, are kind of the chaotic final scene. There's a scene where the werewolf, or David as the werewolf, is in some adult theater, and he's talking to he's talking to Jack, his dead friend, who looks horrible at this time, as well as all the people he killed the night before for the first cycle of the full moon. And obviously then he changes and kills everyone in the theater. But then the cops are holding this, holding like the doors, or it's like a one of those things that comes down, like in stores or whatever. And he busts through there. The werewolf busts through there, and there is just fucking chaos everywhere. I can almost say I've never seen a realistic like car pileup scene in comparison to this. There are people getting ran over. There are people getting thrown through the glass of their windshield and like getting cut on the glass. It is so fucking chaotic, so fucking realistic and brutal. It is ridiculous. Just an amazing scene. Like, bravo to John Landis, the way he shot this, and Rick Baker and the practical effects team for doing this. It just absolutely chaotic. And I can't talk about this movie without talking about the ending of this movie, because this movie is, in my opinion, as a first-time viewer, it's a tragedy. Okay, we all know at the end of this movie, David, as the werewolf, is going to get put down. It's building to that. It has to come to that. So it's a tragedy. He falls for this girl. She falls for him. You know, she can't save him. You know, there's a scene earlier in that day where he calls and talks to his sister. Tell mom and dad I love them. I love you too. And you can just see he cares, and he knows deep down it's over. You know, he is going to turn into a werewolf and either keep killing people or have to kill himself, or, you know, he's trying to get locked up earlier. But it's tragic. When the nurse, and I can't remember her name, Jenny maybe, I stand to be corrected on that, but the nurse finally confronts him in the alley, and, you know, she tells him, I love you. And you can see, even as a werewolf, you can see he acknowledges that, but he's too far gone at that moment. He is way too far gone. And he lunges at her, and he gets shot, and we see his dead body on the ground. Boom, then the movie ends. So it's just tragic, because you can just see it building to this, and you know, and you're kind of hoping there can be another ending, but deep down you know there's not. There's no way. So let's talk about the meaning I gather from all of this that we get through this movie. From me, and everybody's different when they watch movies. You know, the metaphors you see in a movie might be different than the metaphors I see in a movie, and vice versa, and things like that. But for me, this movie is about survivor's guilt. Like I said, this could be common knowledge. You could be saying, no shit, Nick. Obviously, it's about survivor's guilt. But for me, that's what I take away from this. When Jack is getting killed by the werewolf, David, his initial reaction is to run away. And then he stops himself and goes back and gets attacked himself and sees Jack's body there. But it's about survivor's guilt. Unfortunately, I have personal experience with survivor's guilt. I'm not going to get into it, but I haven't seen a friend of mine get mauled by a werewolf in front of me. Unfortunately, I do have experience with that. So maybe that's why this movie hit so close to home to me. For me, I should say. But it's a real thing. And it's tough to deal with. But what's interesting about this movie is we get the initial werewolf scene, right? The kill, you know, the shock. Holy shit, David's already dead. He was one of our leads, right? Or Jack. I keep mixing up David and Jack. But Jack's already dead. He was one of our leads, right? The rest of the movie, the next hour of this movie or so, maybe not hour, but 45 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes of this movie is David in the hospital dealing with the ramifications of what happened, trying to come to grips with it. And it's just building up to, you know, he is not going to have a choice. He is going to have to deal with this at some point on a personal and psychological level. And if you notice in the hospital, yes, you know, he is saying, you know, Jack is dead, blah, 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 but he's not really emotionally dealing with it. He's not dealing with the fact that he saw his best friend be murdered in front of him. And eventually he is going to have to deal with it. You know, Jack is coming to him in visions and stuff like that. You know, you're going to turn. You're going to have to deal with this, basically, is the way I was taking this. You know, you're going to have to deal with what happened. You're going to have to deal with what happened. And from David's perspective, he's not dealing with it at the time. You know, he's sitting there and, you know, trying to, you know, grapple with it, but he's really not emotionally dealing with what happened, because I think he knows if he does, aka deal with the werewolf, he's going to lose himself in the grief of what happened, in the guilt of what happened. And then when he does, there is no coming back from that. It would have been very easy for this movie to, have David turn into a werewolf 15 minutes after we see him wake up in the hospital, but that's not what it did. It built into, what we were seeing David try to grapple with, try to come to terms with. And eventually, he found out, and we found out, he's not going to have a choice. He's going to have to deal with it, and it's going to destroy him and ruin his relationship with the nurse and ruin him as a person. So that's kind of what I took from this movie, and I think it's really deep. And like I said, maybe not a lot of people have taken that from this movie, or maybe everyone has, and I'm just, late to the party, and I haven't been reading up on this, haven't been like in the know, because I wanted to avoid things from this movie because I hadn't seen it. So that's what I took from this movie. I loved it. Like I said, it's going to be a yearly staple for me, at least. I can't wait to watch it again because, like I said, I'm still, thinking about this movie, and I'm just fascinated by it. And I'm sure there's a lot of things I missed here as a first-time watch, and just kind of wanted to get my thoughts out there the next day. So yeah, that is my initial thoughts on An American Werewolf in London. Tell me in the comments, are you guys a fan of this movie? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.